segment on a high note, and I want to welcome everybody here. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you need to take a break, take a walk, come on back. And I'd like to introduce my dear friend, Dave Willett.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everybody. I have a feeling I know how many hands are going to raise because this is Josh's first time in Michigan, so y'all better give him a good Michigan welcome. But how many have actually seen Josh in person? Anybody? Couple? Fantastic. How many have heard him on a podcast or a YouTube video or anything like that? Cool. A lot of hands. I like that. Look, I met this guy about two and a half years ago. We met through Tim Kaufman. Tim hooked us up, and then we got together at Plant Stock in 2016 at the Esselstyns, which was awesome. But Josh has got such an infectious personality. You guys are in for a treat, and just to give you a little peek at what it was like. So I picked Josh up from the airport on Sunday, and the plane gets in at about 2:30 in the afternoon, about 2:30 in the afternoon. And anybody that's familiar with Sundays, that's about halftime of a football game. And Josh is like the biggest Who Dat fan that I've ever met in my life. Y'all know who a Who Dat is, right? If not, he'll tell you. So he gets off the plane. He's, bro, you got to get me to a TV. The Saints are playing Atlanta, man. I'm like, got you covered. So found a little sports bar close enough, and we got there right in time to see the Saints score a touchdown, which was awesome. It was good timing. The game ended up going into overtime, and in Josh fashion, there just happened to be a couple other Saints fans there that were from New Orleans, but they live in Michigan, so they bonded right away. They were like, yeah, bro. And so the game went into overtime, and it looked like the Saints went in for the game-winning touchdown. And they're like high-fiving each other and stuff, and he slapped me on the shoulder. I'm like, dang, dude. But me being a Lions fan, know that they better review this because we've seen a few touchdowns back, and so I'm just laying low, and sure enough, man, it's like knee was down. It's like, but still, they were on the 1-inch line or something. So Drew Brees takes the next ball in, touchdown. Woo woo, cool. So Josh was happy. So we his first time in Michigan, he's all happy because he saw the Saints win. It was a huge game for him, and then the Lions won. Crazy. How crazy is that? That's even more amazing. So Josh came in a couple days early because we had a 5K run yesterday, and anybody that didn't come to it, the next time we have an event like that, you really need to come because they're a blast. We did one a couple years ago for Rich Roll. Speaking of Rich Roll, has anybody heard the Rich Roll podcast at all? Yeah, Rich, we've had him here. Rich is a good guy. Well, Josh just did his third Rich Roll podcast. Number one was 63, and then 101, and this is going to be who knows what. But he just did it last weck. So keep your ears open for that. But so Josh says, we got to get there a little bit early because I got to warm up. He says, I said, all right, how early? He said, I just got to get in 5 miles before the run. I'm like, okay, that's warming up. So we get there. He gets his warm up in, and people come, and we have a 5K, and we had a blast. And and then Paul had invited him to work out with him this morning. He says, let Josh know if he wants to work out. Here's the gym. Got to be there at 8:30 or whatever. And I dropped Josh off at the hotel last night, and I look at the map. I'm like, yeah, it's about 8 miles, 9 miles. I said, it's just a straight line. And Josh says, I could just run there, man. I'm like, really? Yeah, it's cool, man. It's cool. And sure enough, he ended up jogging to work out with Paul, just 10 miles. That's just the type of guy that he is. So you guys are in for a treat. And without further ado, Josh LaJaunie.
that, baby. I promise I'm going to. Is this on? Is it on? Yeah. All right. Promise I'm going to get emotional. I can't believe I'm standing here right now with Dr. Esselstyn sitting here. I just got through hanging out with Miss Ann and just sharing conversation. And this group, Paul Chatlin, and this entire organization flies me up here to Detroit to come and speak about my story. I'm just this guy, from Chagbay, Louisiana. Google it. It's a little bitty place. I'm a C student. Grew up in a trailer park. I'm nothing special. And coming here, seeing Detroit, having that experience with the football game, watching the Saints win, thank God, especially against Atlanta. We won't go down that rabbit hole. And then, Detroit wins. I stayed up late enough to see that they had it in the bag. And what I realize is there's a lot of similarities between where I'm from, down on the bayou in South Louisiana, and New Orleans is the closest city. We're a very small city for being a big town, right? A lot of similarities between New Orleans and Detroit. We're blue collar, it seems. We work our asses off. We make a living. We love. We do family first. We have all of the these values around nature and around sport and being out in the wild and football and all of this stuff. And I just can't really wrap my mind around how lucky I am to be able to come and, I always knew Detroit was a city, right? But I never knew, we were kindred spirits. New Orleans and Detroit are so close. And I feel it. I felt it at the run yesterday. It was amazing. We ran in the rain. Very Louisiana thing to do. And this morning, again, ran up to go hang out with Paul and do a workout and halfway pass out through hot vinyasa flow yoga after running 10 miles, but I made it, right? I made it. And now I'm here, and I'm just astounded. I cannot believe that this is where I'm standing after just a few short years ago. I'm picking up Born to Run for the first time. I'm watching Forks Over Knives for the first time, and learning about Caldwell Esselstyn for the first time and Dr. Campbell for the first time. And it's a very different thing that I learned from what I grew up with. I know that you guys probably feel a lot of the same way. This country boy living, this cooking meat and doing the beer and going to the camps. I don't know what y'all call them. Maybe y'all have little ice fishing things where you bore a hole in the lake. I don't know. I haven't done that. We need a boat. Our water never freezes. But I could imagine in that little ice shack there's beer. There's some junk food, there's some potato chips, there's the whole thing. You probably have a little fryer set up. I don't know. That's what we would have at our camp. And living that lifestyle, being that thing, is important to me. And it was important to my grandfather. It was important to all the LaJaunies that died of heart attacks before me. It's important to all of us. And the thing is, what's so crazy about it is living that lifestyle of beer and meat and whiskey and parties at the camp and all of the excursions and fishing and hunting trips really got me to a place, as much fun as I had and as much memories as I created doing all of that living, all of that country boy life, it brought me to a really miserable place. Because not only was I miserable physically, because by the time I was 32 years old, I was up to about 420 pounds. Which wasn't really a big deal to me because I had seen my grandfather, who stood 6'3", 6'2", my entire life and weighed close to, say, 380, 390. And he was the big stomping man. He was the boss of everything to me. He was important. I called him Bam Bam because he just bounced around. He was in charge. He slammed stuff. He was mad a lot. You know, he was the boss. And so when I got up to be 420 pounds and I could put down a half gallon of whiskey in a weekend, I was proud, right? I was being just like my Bam Bam. And I get that. A lot of us do that. A lot of us do that. A lot of us are upholding traditions. You know, a lot of us are trying to outpace the people that came before us in this very unhealthy thing. In a weird way to sort of get their approval, you know? And I watched my grandfather be big and heavy my whole life. I watched him slowly deal with the physical, mechanical manifestations that come with that, the knee pain, the back pain, all of the stuff. He would have to carry around a chair with him and sit down over the years. And it was just part of, he'd get the handicap sticker and all of the things to go to Walmart and ride the cart. You know, see a powerful man do that over the years. And here I was, 32 years old, sort of ignoring all of those things. I am doing the same thing. I'm being the same thing. And not only was I uncomfortable physically, but I was uncomfortable because I had this brain that knew better. And so there was a part of me that was ashamed of being this way. There was a part of me that knew I could do better, that I should do better, that I needed to do better, that if I didn't do better, I'd wind up dead early. But the food is good. You know? And that's the way we all live, right? But the food is really, really good. And I know how to cook it well, so I can make an entire room full of people happy with crawfish or boudin or fried fish or gumbo or jambalaya, the whole thing. So it's like this whole identity wrapped up in it. And it was stuff that my grandfather taught me how to do, you know? But here I am at 420 pounds in, say, you know, late 2010. And what was different for me in my life at this time was I was actually going back to school as a non-traditional student because my beautiful wife, who I looked up, that was one thing that really sort of shook my idea of impossible, was someone married me and I was big and fat, like I wore a 62 long jacket on my wedding day. But she encouraged me to believe in myself. She encouraged me to go back to school, and I was starting to think about things with a little bit different outlook. Not only did my wife have me going back to school and believing in myself and doing those types of things, but she also encouraged me to take my passion as a Saints fan a step further and become a season ticket holder. And so we did that in 2006 as a way to participate in the city after Katrina. We felt devastated to watch people dying like 50 minutes away from us. It was heart-wrenching to watch that after Katrina. We didn't know how to help. We didn't know how to participate. But my wife talked me in, hey, let's get season tickets, Josh. I was like, that seems very frivolous and scary, but okay. And lo and behold, by 2009, as a season ticket holder, year 3 of being a season ticket holder, after watching Gleason block a punt in the dome and crying like a baby when we kicked the field goal to go to the Super Bowl for the first time, like, we won a Super Bowl. And that was another thing that really shook what I thought might have been possible in my life. It really made me reconsider everything. You know? And so 2011 rolls around, and not only do I have this beautiful wife, not only am I a season ticket holder for a Super Bowl winning franchise, but I read books now. I feel smart. You know, I picked up a book and I read about Sean Payton and a lot of the things that he ran into coming to South Louisiana as a Michigan guy, and what he talked about, how we're different in some ways with some of our complacency and we were just happy to still be around after Katrina. We didn't want to reach for something amazing. Oh, Super Bowl, that would be greedy. We just want an 8-8 season, Coach. We're happy. I mean, I know you can relate. And so I pick up that book and it really made me want to live my life in a way that would make Coach proud if he ever meets me. He'll be proud of this fan. I know it seems small, but I know you guys get it. It's so visceral. And so in 2010, things started to change for me. I took that passion, I took that fire, and I put it into my schoolwork. I wanted to make Coach proud of how I was going to finish this degree. And part of finishing that degree was standing in front of an auditorium full of people at Nicholls State University in Thibodaux and giving a presentation not unlike this. And I didn't want to do that as a big fat guy who had a size 22 neck and a size 62 long jacket and wore a size 56 breeches, like my grandfather would say. I didn't want to do it that way, you know? And so what started to happen is in 2011, my buddy, just out of the blue, called me. And he said, hey, I'm going to start going to the gym in the morning. You want to join? And I was like, yes, I'm in. And that was it. It just started to change right then and there. It wasn't the end of the process by any means. It was just the first step. There's been an infinite amount of iteration and innovation and creativity and problem solving along the way. But it was that initial thing, that initial step was joining the gym with my buddy Jeffrey, a guy I'd been friends with since kindergarten. And he had seen me lose my football scholarship and balloon up and get big and heavy and all of that stuff. That was another part of my weight gain. And so in 2011, here I am with the idea of impossible has been really shaken in my mind between having a beautiful wife and being a Saints season ticket holder and, hey, we won the Super Bowl and here you are about to get a degree, Josh. Maybe I can lose this weight because, you know, it's miserable. By the middle of that summer, I had started trying to run. And very early on, all it was just like, I call it a jiggle jog because I was doing lots of clapping and flapping and stuff. You know, it's just a very easy one of these, right? Very, very gentle. I didn't want to hurt myself. I wanted to lose weight. I had read in this Runner's World magazine about weight loss as a runner and how it really helps to burn fat. So I started with the elliptical, then I picked up the treadmill, and then I started going outside, and I signed up for my first race, the Crescent City Classic in New Orleans, which is huge, 30,000 people in this race. People come from all over the world to run this race. It's amazing. And something changed. I started wanting to be something instead of not be something. You know, I started wanting to be a runner instead of not wanting to not be fat anymore. And things were changing for me. And plant-based hadn't even entered the picture yet. It's why I'm really talking about this part of the story, because we never know where people are at that moment, right? So what was happening for me right then was there was an identity shift that was starting to happen. I was starting to go from like this ex-football player has-been who was priding himself in his whiskey consumption and his heft while secretly bashing himself in the mirror before he would go take a shower, living this dual thing in my mind, you know? And something was changing. I was wanting to be a runner now. I was meeting other runners. I was having aspirations of being faster. That first Crescent City Classic was 1 hour and 43 minutes it took me to finish, which if you're a runner at all, that is not exactly a quick 10K, you know? But something happened after that. I developed goals. I started wanting to be faster. I wanted to maybe I can do a 10K in under an hour. That sounds audacious, right? And my wife was right there with me. Yes, baby, we can do it. We're going to train all year. And we get that next one done. The next year rolls around, and we get in 59, 56. I barely got in, but I got in under an hour, right? So I was pumped. But something happened as I was training for that was very profound. As I read a book called Born to Run. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Born to Run, but that book changed me because it introduced me to Scott Jurek, who actually did run the Appalachian Trail. I don't know where Paul got that. I did not run the Appalachian Trail, I promise you. I have run a 100-mile race. He was just, but Scott Jurek was phenomenal at running, and that blew my mind. It's like, and this guy doesn't eat meat? Holy cow. It was starting to crack the surface for me. And I went down, next thing, it was just a very rapid progression. I went down the rabbit hole, and, then as the weight started to fly off, because by April of 2013, after I learned about Scott Jurek, I learned about Rich Roll, I learned about Forks Over Knives, I learned about Dr. Esselstyn, I'm all in by this point, and I'm running. And so the remaining 120 pounds just flew off of my body in a way I had never experienced weight loss in my entire life. And not only was I getting lighter, but I was getting faster. I was actually getting competitive. So the next year in the Crescent City Classic, I was kind of hoping to break 50 minutes. And what I wound up doing was breaking into the top 500 finishers of a 30,000 person race. And I got a commemorative poster. I finished in 43 minutes and 8 seconds, which that was over an hour. That was an hour off of my first 10K. And now I'm all over the place. I'm all in. Now I want to do a half marathon, and I want to do a full marathon. And this is late 2013, 2014, 2013. I'd go on the Rich Roll podcast for my very first time in December 2013. I announced that I'm going to run my first marathon. I do that first marathon in 2014. And then after that, I'm trying to get faster and faster marathons. It just took over like gravity. It just was a snowball. And as I fell in love with running, and I fell in love with what I was learning about on the Rich Roll podcast, which is an education unto itself, I started to change, or not change, but add to what was passionate, what was causing passion, what was creating passion inside my heart. And a lot of it has to do with Dr. Esselstyn's work and the fact that that country boy living, that fat boy lifestyle, for the first time in my life, was not just directly related to the, not just the food being directly related to the fat. I understood that, but I never understood that the food was directly related to the disease that had taken almost every single male member of my family up until me right now. And things changed. I'm still a competitive athlete. I want to run all the time. There's something about losing 230 pounds from your frame that makes you feel light, I think. As I'm extremely energetic, I want to run all the time. If anybody's up for it, we can go after this. But things changed. I still enjoy running. I still enjoy the race. I still enjoy spending hours and hours going through the middle of the night in some godforsaken location and making it through a long, difficult race. But I also enjoy doing this right here and talking to people and telling people that are where I once was, that it's not hopeless. It's not even close. It's so simple. There's such a simple shift to make. There's such a simple thing to be had. And it's right there to be taken. And I know that I'm sort of in an echo chamber tonight. I know that most people get this already and understand it. But please understand that it's not just one entry point. You start. Well, there's an entry point, but you start. But that's like a seed that gets sprouted, right? And you never stop growing. You keep going and growing, and it's a perpetual thing. And the growth medium for that sprouted seed of change in your life is community. And what Paul and them provide here, what David and them are part of, what all of you guys are here for tonight, is really providing a growth medium for all of the seeds that are beginning to sprout in this population across this country. And it's a beautiful thing, because it's not about weight loss. It's not about becoming a runner, which I learned. I was listening to Dr. Esselstyn. I was like, oh, if the endothelium can do that, and if the artery can open up, it could, for a cardiac patient, it could also make an athlete better, probably. So I stuck with it because of that. But the power is there for anyone to really take the locus of control, realize they have it, understand where you are today, and take that next step forward, just one step forward, and understand that you have a group around you to help sprout that tree, help sprout that seed and grow it into a mighty oak. So 230 pounds, several thousand miles later, I have made my grandfather really proud. He saw me win a 50-mile race in person. He's my buddy. We lost him a couple of years ago. The last year of his life was brutal. It wasn't directly because of heart disease, but it was it was the vascular dementia that made his last year completely miserable. And now I see all of the opportunities that modern medicine had to help correct that through the decades of me dealing with him being sick in different ways. And I'm angry now. I'm upset now. I want to go on the offense now. I want to help be a part of the attack on this paradigm that must shift, right? So thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And go Lions, right?
Awesome. Josh, thank you. You're an inspiration to all. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. I'm Dr. Bob Brakey, and I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. I just want to tell you, about a year ago, I found this book at a secondhand bookstore called Masters of Achievement. And it was the 100 greatest minds of all time. But the coolest thing, it was written in 1911. So from the perspective of people 100 years ago, and they went all the way from Aristotle and Plato to Washington to Lincoln. Einstein wasn't in there, of course. He wasn't an achiever yet. But I'm envisioning a day now. Oh, one other cool thing. It had that perspective because one thing you could see is like in the last days of George Washington live, he had developed a type of laryngitis and quinsy, and he died in spite of them bleeding him several times. Makes you kind of think, what were they thinking even 120 years later that they had made that mistake? Well, I'm envisioning a time my great-great-great-granddaughter dusts it off the shelf and says, let's write a sequel to this Masters of Achievement book. Let's put a special section in there about plant-based achievers because close to the turn of the 21st century, we were a nation in crisis. We were a world in crisis. Healthcare costs spiraling out of control from chronic diseases that were preventable. Our biosphere being destroyed by animal feedlots, methane, topsoil erosion, and water waste. And a handful of pioneers came to the occasion and catalyzed a movement that said, we're going to change this. We're going to make this world a better place. And chief among them, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. The book's going to go on. It's going to say, born in 1933 in New York, was an early achiever, went to Yale University, medical school at Case Western, graduated in 1956. And that same year, he won a gold medal in the Olympics down in Australia. But he didn't stop there. He came back to Cleveland Clinic, did his surgery residency, met his wonderful wife, Ann, who's the granddaughter of the founder of the Cleveland Clinic. And they have been there since. Numerous achievements, accolades, professional positions, too many to list. But what we know him best for, of course, is his catalyzing this movement that is taking roots all over, especially here in Detroit. Lifetime Achievement Award from the Institute for Lifestyle Medicine, the Plantition Project Award winner, Forks Over Knives. Again, his accolades here in this movement are well known. And saving lives, Paul, thanks for sharing your story. Inspiring a movement. Thank you all for being here. And most of all, I want to say you're in for a treat. If you haven't seen him speak yet, you're in for a treat. If you have, Going to be amazingly awesome. We're among a small percentage of all of humanity who will get to see this band, who will leave a legacy, not only for decades, but for centuries to come, turning a movement around to save ourselves, our population, our families, and the world. Dr. Esselstyn, thank you for joining us.
Well, I hope the mic is on. Dr. Brakey, thank you for those kind words. Paul Chatelain and the PBNSG group, thank you for this kind invitation to share with you once again some of my research and clinical strategies, and to try to help really define what is really going to be a seismic revolution in health. And that's really at our fingertips. And since Paul made me promise to get you out of here by midnight, we got to get started. I'm going to change the title a little bit to that is the nutritional reversal of cardiovascular disease. Is it fact or is it fiction? A little housekeeping, and then let's get into it. We in the medical profession have to be really almost hanging our heads in recognition of the fact that we have built a billion-dollar health industry around an illness that does not even exist in half the planet. All right? If you were a cardiac surgeon, you hang out your shingle in Okinawa, rural China, the Papua Highlands, Central Africa, the Tarahumara. You better plan on selling pencils. They don't have any heart disease. Why? They're all thriving on whole food, plant-based nutrition without oil. This I took this is the oldest slide in my collection, and that was taken when I was leaving Vietnam. I spent a year there as a combat surgeon, and I use this to remind me to share with the audience that if we carefully look at the autopsies of our GIs who died in Korea of combat, those average 20-year-olds, 80% of them already have gross evidence of coronary artery disease that you can see without a microscope. Not enough for their cardiac events yet, but there the disease is. So that study was then repeated, actually, for 45 years later in 1999, this time looking at young women and men who have died between the ages of 17 and 34, who have died of accidents, homicides, and suicides. Interesting enough, now the disease is everybody at that study had early coronary artery disease. So you graduate from high school in this country, and you get a diploma, and you also get the Foundation for Heart Disease. What kind of an arrangement is that? Not very good. But let's do this. Let's look at a chance when we truly had an opportunity to get it absolutely right. World War II. The Axis powers of Germany overran the Low Countries of Holland and Belgium, and they occupied Denmark and Norway. And it was characteristic that the Germans would take away their troops. So their cattle, their sheep, their goats, their pigs, their chickens, their turkeys, gone, suddenly. So when the Germans overran these Low Countries in Western Europe, and they occupied Denmark and Norway, and they took away their livestock for their troops, it was Drs. Strom and Janssen in 1951 reporting in England's most prestigious journal, The Lancet. They looked at the deaths from stroke and heart attack that they found in Norway during this time period. Now, if I had a stick, I could point to it, but maybe I've got a pointer. Let's use the stick, my arm. My arm. All right. Here we are, deaths in Norway, 1927, heart attack and stroke going up. 1930, deaths going up. 35 going up. 39, in come the Germans. Whoop, 40. Whoop, 41. Who knew these Germans were these great public health educators? But what happened in 1945? Look, with the death of Adolf Hitler, the cessation of hostilities in the European theater, immediately back comes the meat, back comes the dairy, back come the strokes, back come the heart attacks. Pretty profound what happened during that war, but we as physicians just didn't get it, okay? On the right, not good. Not good. You're probably saying when this small opening finally shuts, there's going to be a heart attack. Well, actually, interestingly enough, sure, something this narrow can cause chest pain, angina, shortness of breath. Heart attack? Probably not. This is a stable blockage. Somebody's had this for many, many decades. And when that finally shuts off, some of these little tiny collaterals, the body building its own bypass, will often sustain the downstream heart muscle viability even when that closes off because of these little collaterals that develop. That's 10% of heart attacks. We're going to show you shortly 90%. But on the left, what I really want you to understand, there are two words, two phrases and words that I want you to totally grasp tonight. The only part that I really care that you take home from this presentation. And that is, in a normal artery, this, even of those of you in the back, this tiny little dark line, the inside of a normal artery, just a few cells thick, the endothelium. And the endothelium, all experts would agree, is really where the inception, the onset, and the beginning of cardiovascular disease has its start. Because there are certain foods that you're going to learn about tonight that every time they pass our lips, we injure the capacity of this endothelial layer to make that magic molecule, nitric oxide, that protects us all from ever developing blockages and plaque. Now you've had the two words, you're going to hear it again and again and again. The endothelium and nitric oxide. Now when you start eating your milkshake, your pizza, your cheeseburger, the first thing that happens is that things begin to get sticky, sticky, sticky. Your endothelium gets sticky. Your white cells get sticky. Your LDL cholesterol gets sticky. Your platelets get sticky. Now here, even though I went to Yale, this is from Harvard. This is Peter Libby, and he has a wonderful understanding of how this disease begins to develop. And if you can look, I can't quite reach up there, but in the blue is where the blood is flowing. And then you can see, going across below the blue, a single layer of, thank you, a single layer of sort of pink cells. Those are the endothelial cells. Now let's make some sense out of this together. Start in the left, way up high in the blue, those orange LDL, bad cholesterol particles. You've had the milkshake, you've had the pizza, everything's sticky. They bump up against the sticky endothelium, find a crack, a fissure, an opening, migrate now your LDL cholesterol into the subendothelial space where they are no longer orange because they have now been oxidized by your nasty free radicals, most of which from the food you're eating. And the subendothelial space does not like at all having these small, hard, dense particles and calls upon the SWAT team. Our white blood cells, which come across, and here, Peter Libby of Harvard has painted the white blood cells blue in honor of Yale, and we'd like that. But here, this macrophage is just gobbling up, just like Pac-Man, all these small, hard, dense LDL cholesterols. We get all the way over to here, and now it's so chock full of LDL particles, we change the name. That's what medicine does. It's now called the foam cell. And the foam cell is truly the Darth Vader of the sequence of events because it elaborates, it manufactures these nasty, nasty chemical substances we call metalloproteinases. That's not on the test. But metalloproteinases such as tromellicin, elastase, collagenase, myeloperoxidase, what do they do that is so bad? They take and progressively erode the cap over your plaque. It gets so thin that the sheer force of blood racing over it tears the cap over the plaque. You have now, that seminal moment has occurred. You've ruptured your plaque. There is extravasation, or the oozing out of, if you will, of plaque content into the flowing blood, which activates our clotting factors, platelets. So in a matter of further minutes after you've ruptured your plaque, you now start to form a clot where the rupture has occurred. And that clot is in and of itself self-propagating. So in a number of further minutes, suddenly, the entire artery, which was only blocked 35%, which is probably 80% of Detroit, and has no symptoms, suddenly you go from 35% to 100%. You don't get symptoms till you're 75% blocked. But this is 100%. All the downstream heart muscle has suddenly lost all of its oxygen and nutrients. It starts to die. There's your 90% of your heart attacks. Now, if I do my job correctly this evening, every one of you and your friends and relatives should be able to make yourselves heart attack proof. Okay? How are you going to do that? Well, we're not going to do it with a drug or a pill or a procedure or an operation. You're going to do it by changing your biochemistry. How are you going to do that? By eating whole food, plant-based nutrition. All right. Now, forget the x-ray here. I want you to concentrate. The artist has drawn an artery, half plaque, half open. And these little innermost lining cells we just discussed are called endothelial cells. Now, up until 1980, we used to think of these endothelial cells as cute little red bricks that were lining our pipes. That all changed in 1980 when Dr. Furchtgott, working in Brooklyn, was taking the largest blood vessel in the rodent, the aorta. And he would take that aorta and he would make in sort of an elliptical spiral staircase cut on it. And then he would immerse it in a bath of saline and it would constrict. However, one day, no cut, immersed it, it dilated. Again, no cut, no injury to the endothelial cell. Immersed it, it dilated. Suddenly the race was on globally. What was this E, D, R, F that Dr. Furchtgott had discovered? Endothelial derived relaxation factor. Kind of rolls right off your tongue. Thank heaven that term was with us for only 8 years when Dr. Furchtgott, Dr. Murad, and Dr. Lou Ignarro discovered that the EDRF was a gas, nitric oxide, with some truly remarkable functions, like what? 1, nitric oxide keeps all the cellular elements within our bloodstream flowing smoothly like Teflon rather than Velcro, keeps things from getting sticky. Number 2, nitric oxide is the strongest blood vessel dilator in the body. When you climb stairs, the arteries to your heart, to your legs, they widen, they dilate, nitric oxide. Number 3, Nitric oxide protects the wall of the artery from becoming thick and stiff or inflamed, protects us from getting high blood pressure, hypertension. Number four is the absolute key. A safe and adequate amount of nitric oxide will protect you all from ever developing blockages or plaque. So anybody on the planet, whether they're from Chicago, New York, London, Berlin, or Detroit, if they have cardiovascular disease, it is because by now in the preceding decades, they have so sufficiently trashed, injured, and produced in their endothelial cells an absolute train wreck. They simply don't have enough nitric oxide to protect themselves from making blockages and plaque. But the good news here is this. This is not a malignancy. This is a completely benign foodborne illness. And once you can get patients to understand that they produce their disease by destroying the ability of their endothelial cells to make nitric oxide, and they just get it into their brain that we are empowering them as the locus of control to absolutely, totally stop any further injury to the endothelial cells. And when that happens, nitric oxide is restored, disease is halted, and very often we see exciting elements of disease reversal. So, now, as I look out in this, as I look out in this audience, I suddenly see in your faces people saying, God, I wonder what my level of nitric oxide could be. Well, how do you measure it? Well, you don't do this regularly yet in a doctor's office, but what happens in a research setting is if you take an ultrasound probe and place it over the brachial artery at the elbow, there on the baseline, you'll see on the screen, you'll see the diameter of the artery. Then, for 5 minutes, you encircle the upper arm with a blood pressure cuff that you inflate above systolic blood pressure so that for 5 minutes you have absolutely zero blood flow to your forearm and hand. I've had that done. It's not exactly habit forming. But then you take the cuff off, and immediately after the cuff is removed, you measure. Once again, the brachial artery in the normal individual, it'll be 30% greater from the outpouring of nitric oxide for the time when their tourniquet was on. So the next great thing that happened was that Dr. Robert Vogel. Vogel is the chairman of cardiology at the University of Maryland. And he took a group of healthy young subjects to a certain fast food restaurant, which is characterized by arches which are golden. And half of them had the cornflakes, the other half had the hash browns and sausage. Then they measured the brachial artery tourniquet test. Those that had the cornflakes, absolutely immediate, normal. Those that had the hash browns and sausage, 120 minutes after that meal, they could not dilate the artery. That single meal had so trashed, so injured, so compromised the capacity of the endothelial cells to make nitric oxide, they didn't have enough. But as they followed them to the late afternoon, early evening, they began to recover. But you and I know that next morning for breakfast, it's going to be scrambled eggs and bacon. Lunchtime, white bread with cold cuts and mayonnaise. Supper time, we'll have baked potato with sour cream, lamb chops, vegetables soaked in butter, ranch dressing on the salad, ice cream for dessert. Starting in childhood, here in the good old USA, we start beating down and injuring and absolutely turning our endothelial cells into a train wreck. So that not surprisingly, we have this epidemic of cardiovascular disease, which really need never, ever exist. Okay. been said that a good speaker is going to start out by telling you what they're going to tell you, and then they tell you what they're going to tell you, and then when they're finished, they tell you what you told them. Well, this is what I've told you about the function of the endothelial cells nitric oxide. Prevents stickiness, vasodilatation, avoids thickening, prevents blockages, prevents smooth muscle migration, and destroys the foam cell. Pretty exciting nitric oxide. Okay. Now, we don't have time tonight for the rest of these, but every single one of these are natural defense mechanisms that you have to protect your blood vessels. We've talked about the endothelial cell, but the reason I throw this up is because I want you to know that when you're eating whole food, plant-based nutrition, you are absolutely optimizing all of your defense mechanisms. Okay. Now, how about a little study? How do we know whether this is any good or not? This is the first study that I was involved in when I was still actively doing surgery. And so it was a small study, but these patients were seriously ill. They'd failed their first or second bypass. They'd failed their first or second angioplasty. They were too sick for those procedures or they had refused. And 5 were told by the expert cardiologist they wouldn't last the year. Well, those 5 all made it for 20 years, and we began to see some actually striking results. However, what you have to know tonight are, here are the foods that I asked these patients today never again to have past their lips, because these foods injure the endothelial cells. Any drop of oil, olive oil, corn oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, coconut oil, palm oil, oil in a cracker, oil in a piece of bread, oil injures the endothelial cells. Anything with a mother or a face, meat, fish, chicken, fowl, turkey, and eggs, and dairy, milk, cream, butter, cheese, ice cream, and yogurt, and I don't like the caffeine in coffee. All right, so somebody said, why are you taking away the oil? Here's why. This is one of multiple peer-reviewed scientific studies showing the tragedies of oil. Olive, soybean, and palm oil intake have a similar acute detrimental effect over the endothelial function in healthy young subjects. Absolutely solid science. Now, you see up here lecithin and carnitine. These molecules are found in people who are omnivores, persons who eat meat, persons who eat dairy, persons who eat seafood and poultry. They contain the molecules of lecithin and carnitine. But if you are an omnivore who is eating these foods, your gut microbiome, your bacteria in your gut, possesses the capability of turning and metabolizing the lecithin and the carnitine into TMAO, trimethylamine oxide, which injures your blood vessel, okay? So that's how animal protein and meat injures you. Lecithin and carnitine, if you're an omnivore, you have the gut bacteria that make TMAO, which leads to vascular disease. But the striking thing that Stan Hazen found out while he was doing this study, if he took somebody who was totally plant-based, fed them a lamb chop, measured their blood, no TMAO. Plant-based persons do not possess the gut bacteria that give them the possibility of making TMAO, unless if you keep eating that lamb chop for 5 to 7 days, then you begin to have the bacteria that will work against you. I'm going to shift gears for a moment because although we're talking about cardiovascular disease, this, in October of 2015, was a monumental moment in science. The World Health Organization, think of it, the World Health Organization, WHO, were absolutely able to agree on declaring that red meat had the same degree of carcinogenicity as smoking cigarettes. Pretty powerful. Okay. Now, I've taken away some of those foods that are going to injure you. What are you going to eat? You're going to eat all these marvelous whole grains for your cereal, bread, pasta, and rolls. 101 different types of legumes, lentils, and beans. All these marvelous red, yellow, green leafy vegetables, and some fruit. Now, one thing that's not in the book, because we've added it just in the last 6.5, 7 years. When I see a patient with heart disease, I ask them to try to imagine their head could shrink enough so they could get their head into the artery going to their heart. They would see that that blockage or plaque is an absolute cauldron of oxidative inflammation. So we need antioxidants, but no, do not go down to the health food store and buy a jug of pills that says antioxidant, because it doesn't work and it's going to be harmful. You are going to get your antioxidants from food. Fair enough. What food? Food that is high in what we call ORAC value, O-R-A-C, oxygen radical absorptive capacity. So this means that if you're having raspberries, blueberries, strawberries, and blackberries on your morning oat cereal, that is a terrific start. But nothing can trump the antioxidant value of green leafy vegetables. So I now ask these patients to chew, not smoothies, not juicing, to chew a green leafy vegetable 6 times a day. And I like them to have it be about the size of their fist. After it has first been boiled in water or steamed, 5.5 to 6 minutes, so it's nice and tender. And then you must anoint it with several drops of a delightful balsamic vinegar. Why? Because the acetic acid in the balsamic vinegar has been shown to restore the nitric oxide synthase enzyme contained in the endothelial cell that is responsible for making nitric oxide. And at the same time, when you chew this green leafy vegetable, which is a nitrate, it will mix with the facultative anaerobic bacteria that reside in the crypts and grooves of your tongue, which will reduce the nitrate, that green vegetable you're chewing, to a nitrite. When you swallow the nitrite will be further reduced by your gastric acid to nitric oxide. So now, when you're eating this way, you get nitric oxide, not only from your endothelial cells, but also from your gastrointestinal tract. All focusing, all pointing toward trying to enhance your nitric oxide. Now, what are you doing all day long? All day long when you're doing this, you are bathing and basking that horrible oxidative cauldron of inflammation with nature's most powerful antioxidant. And you're probably saying, well, now what are the green leafy vegetables that Dr. Esselstyn is talking about? You ready? Bok choy, Swiss chard, kale, collards, collard green, beet greens, mustard green, turnip greens, Napa cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, cilantro, parsley, spinach, and arugula and asparagus. And the top 5 are kale, Swiss chard, spinach, arugula, and beet greens. That's what it does for your memory. No oil. So now let's do this. Let's look at some angiograms. In this first study, these angiograms, which were follow-up after several years, were all reviewed in triplicate by the Cleveland Clinic Angiography Core Laboratory. So when I give you a % of reduction in blockage, I know that it's accurate. This is as small as a reduction as your naked eye can see, 10% in the left anterior descending coronary artery of a 67-year-old retired pediatrician. It enlarged from the left here, 10% over to the right here. Actually easier to see. In this 58-year-old factory worker looking at the circumflex artery to the back of the heart, this was described as a 20% improvement from here to here. And this next one is the right coronary artery. In a 54-year-old security guard, this was a 30% improvement. Now, right now at this moment, you have learned, which most physicians don't know or don't realize, that nutrition can reverse heart disease. This is Joe Crow. He's in the first chapter of my book. Now, Joe replaced me as chairman of the Breast Cancer Task Force. At age 44 in 1996, Joe began to get chest pain. He was not a smoker. He was not diabetic. He was not hypertensive, no strong family history. He regularly exercised. And he had a workup by cardiology at the Cleveland Clinic, nothing, in October of 96. A month later, November, finished his surgical schedule, sat down to write postoperative orders. Elephant suddenly on his chest, searing pain in his left jaw, shoulder, and arm. He was having a heart attack. He was whipped down to the cath lab, and they start the catheterization, cardiac arrest, resuscitate, finish the catheterization, one more cardiac arrest, resuscitate, stabilized over the next 3 days, discharged but very depressed. Depressed because at the time of his angiogram, the entire lower one-third of his left anterior descending, the widowmaker, was entirely moth-eaten and diseased over too long a segment. You can't just ram in stent after stent after stent, and was too far down the artery for a bypass. So he was very depressed about this. Ann and I had Joe and his wife for supper 2 weeks after his heart attack. Joe, come on. You've been eating this horrible Western diet. You've got the typical disease. We've got 10 years of data. Why don't you think about going plant-based? Okay, yes, I'll give it a shot. They couldn't do anything else for me, but I'm not taking any of those statin drugs. I don't trust them. Too many side effects. I said, fine, that's your call. He became, over the next 2.5 years, the absolute personification of commitment to whole food, plant-based nutrition. And his total cholesterol plummeted. His LDL went from 98 to 38, and then he had another angiogram. Now, up in the surgical office area, our doors are 3 doors apart. At noontime, on the day that I knew Joe had had his follow-up angiogram, I walked over, opened the door. There he was, sitting behind the desk. Joe, hey, I understand you had the old follow-up angiogram earlier this morning. Mind sharing with me? How did it go? Got up from the desk, came around, put his arms around me, a couple of these, and he said, you know, I think we may be doing okay. Really? Well, would there be any chance that I could see the... Now, this was obviously very exciting for Joe. It was very exciting for me. And when the plaque is young, and it is made up of fat and cholesterol and inflammation, the body can do an incredible job of this type of reversal. However, in the patients who've had their plaque for maybe decades, long-standing, it's going to be made up of fibrosis, scar, and calcification. And it's not going to go away. But interestingly enough, even those patients should be able to return to full activity of daily living without restriction. And it's going to be my responsibility tonight to share with you how that happens. Now, we wanted to see what was going on in the 8 years prior to entering our study. While these patients, these 18 in this early study, were in the hands of expert cardiologists, how many cardiac events of worsening disease did they have? 49 events in these 18 patients of worsening disease in expert cardiovascular care. Once they came into our study, over the next 12 years, which I think makes it the longest of its type in the medical literature, in the next 12 years, 17 of those 18 had no further events. We did have, at 6 years, one little sheep wandered from the flock. Got into the French fries, lamb chops, glazed donuts, more chest pain, a bypass, but now he's back with the flock, but proves the point that I'm sharing with you this evening. So we took a pretty good hit on that. People said, well, those are pretty amazing results, but your nutrition is so extreme that how do you know And this study was small. How do you know that you can do this and get the same results with a larger group? So, in the Journal of Family Practice, in July of 2014, we reported another study. And how do you know you can get patients to do this? Well, of these 198 patients, there were 200, two were lost to follow-up. Of the 198 patients, 177, or 89.3%, were adherent. That was close to 90% were adherent. And people said, I don't know how you do that. Well, I think there is an important key. If you're going to have patients make a lifestyle change, it is so important that you show the patient respect. The only way that I know to show a patient respect is to give them our time. So I'll share with you what we do today. When I get, because once a month at the Cleveland Clinic Wellness Institute, where I direct the Cardiovascular Disease Prevention and Reversal Program, my secretary will be signing up these people who want to come to our program. We limit it to 16 or 17, always with their significant other or spouse who must come. You cannot get a lifestyle change unless you're willing to share this with a spouse or significant other. And this is not a 15-minute office visit. This is a group visit of 6 hours. We start at 9, we finish usually about 3. What happens is these patients are going to learn all about how they themselves have created this illness and precisely how they themselves are going to be empowered as the locus of control to halt and reverse their disease. And I should mention that 2 weeks before the seminar, my secretary will give me a list of the 14 to 16 who are coming. And then I personally call every one of those patients beforehand so that I can get an opportunity to get my arms around their story and at the same time have them have an opportunity to share questions for me so that when we do have them coming to this seminar, they have a strong platform from which we can all move forward. They all get a very hefty notebook, and they get a full hour and a quarter from Ann that you'll hear from shortly. So that seems to be and the other key is this. It's what you've already learned tonight, and hopefully you haven't forgotten. The other thing that they are going to learn, and they hear this time and time and time and time again from me, that the endothelial cell that they have destroyed, it is the capacity of the endothelial cell to make nitric oxide that has deprived them of enough nitric oxide so they cannot protect themselves from making blockages in plaque. Now, so how can anybody, after putting up with me for 6 hours, possibly say to themselves, Dr. Esselstyn, that was really fascinating about the endothelial cell and the nitric oxide, but gosh, I can't wait at Christmas or Thanksgiving or my wife's and my anniversary to go out and destroy some more endothelial cells. And once in a while, somebody will have the temerity to ask me, well, Dr. Esselstyn, what do I do if I eat at a restaurant? I said, no, it's not a problem. Don't eat at restaurants, or if you do, there are 4 reasons to eat out. 1, you don't do the dishes. 2, you don't do the cooking. 3, the ambiance. And 4, the companionship. But you never, ever go out to eat to destroy more endothelial cells. You look the waiter or the waitress in the eye. You tell them right up the start, I am deathly allergic to a single drop of any oil. Whoa, they scramble over the menu. You pick a vegetable from here. You maybe a potato from there. But you can't find anything? Yes, can I just see the chef? Chef comes out, look him in the eye, deathly allergic to a single drop of any oil, can't have any animal protein, nothing that's dairy, and no sugar. They smile at you and say, 23 minutes, I'll be back with something for you. And it's delicious. And they're so flattered. But don't compromise. Do not ever use that as an excuse. What do you do if you're at a small dinner party? Bill and Ruth, been your friends for years. They ask you over, sit down with 4 people, all right? And you say, Now you use your interpersonal skills. Ruth, look, Fred and I have absolutely enjoyed your companions for years, but I should alert you that at the present time, I am being cared for by this absolute monster from Cleveland, Ohio. All right, so how did these patients do? Now look here at the very top, patients with intervention, 119 of those 177, this will give you an idea how sick they were. They'd already had a bypass or a stent. 27 others who were told they had to have a bypass or stent, never had to have it after going through the program. And here you can see those who were adherent. One patient had a small stroke. Non-adherent, 62% had further progression of the disease. And here's the key. Over here, major cardiac events, heart attack, stroke, and death. I found what everybody thinks of in the standard cardiology as good studies. Here's the Mediterranean diet. The end of 4 years, 25% heart attack, stroke, and death. Columbia Presbyterian out of New York City, natural history of heart disease, 20% heart attack, stroke, and death at 4 years. Bill Bowden, 19%. This is the Courage study. Here we are, 0.6%, one patient. What the heck's going on here? We are treating the causation of the illness. Ever since the days of Hippocrates, there's been a basic covenant of trust between the caregiver and the patient that whenever possible, the caregiver will share with the patient what is the causation of the illness. But sadly today in cardiovascular medicine, that's not being done. But I'm happy to say that 3 years ago, I was invited by the American College of Cardiology to join and become a member of their nutrition committee. And that committee is doing everything it can to try to really get cardiologists to become aware of the causation of the illness that they've been designated to treat. All right, here's another. This is a small study, only 3 patients. What was I writing about 3 patients? Well, they were a classic of the tragedies of present-day nutrition until they had a chance to find their way to our shores. This first was Bob Mercer, who I have yet to meet, although I got a wonderful letter from him. He's from Newfoundland, Canada. And at age 44, he had a stroke, totally blocked right carotid artery. And he got a nice recovery from that, but he had this tremendous chest pain. So a bold surgeon in Toronto who would operate on him despite the fact that he had a blocked artery to his brain. And then he had a great result. Now he was 69, but he was in trouble. He was diabetic, searing chest pain again, erectile dysfunction, and he was 40 pounds overweight, and his one remaining carotid artery was now 90% blocked. So, of all things to happen at that moment, his 37-year-old daughter had a heart attack. And during her convalescence, she ran into a book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And she said, "Pop, we got to do this together." They did. A year later, I got a letter from Bob Mercer. "Dr. Esselstyn, thank you. All my chest pain is gone. I've lost 40 pounds. My diabetes is gone. My erectile dysfunction is gone. And my one remaining carotid artery, which was 90% blocked, is now 67% blocked." The next is from Cleveland, Art Soteros, age 32, becomes diabetic. He's overweight. Age 42, the first of 14 stents at the Cleveland Clinic. And then he was told, "Look, these stents aren't working. You've got this aggressive disease. You'll have to have a bypass." Had the bypass. That was good for 14 months. More angina. Then they gathered around the bedside and said, "These procedures aren't working. You'll just have to see what you can do with drugs." He was only 47 years old. And a parishioner told him about our program. He came. Art was absolutely 100%, lost 40 pounds, lost his diabetes, completely lost all of his angina. And for the last 7 years, he is one of several who regularly appears and shares his story with our seminar group. And here is Art before and after. Now, the last is Jim McNamara. Jim, age 55, stroke. They operated on his artery, failed, totally blocked. But he got over that. Then he began getting this searing pain in his left thigh and left calf, especially when he tried to put his leg up at night. It would just go numb and tingling. It was just driving him crazy. So they said, we have to operate. So they operated once, failed, twice, failed, thrice, failed. You've got this aggressive disease. You'll have to do the best you can with drugs. His wife found out about us. He came, totally committed, lost 40 pounds. Now I can walk nonstop. Here he is dancing with his daughter at her wedding. Now, so comparing what we usually see with plant-based, there's no mortality from the diet. There's no morbidity from the diet. And the benefits do nothing but improve with time. And there's an enormous saving because you don't spend anything you got other than just what you've got to eat. And when you think about it, anybody who's had a heart attack now walks around with the sword of Damocles hanging over their head, wondering, when does the other shoe? When do I get my next heart attack? Nonsense. You never have to have another heart attack. We want these people to know how to eat in a way that they can make themselves heart attack proof. Okay. Now, what is the good of having a great heart if your brain doesn't work? Not a bad combination. Okay. We know that if we look at 85-year-olds in Sweden and the United States, there'll be 50% of people who will have dementia. And we learned a great deal about this from the work of Megan Leary and her team from the West Coast, who, reporting at the stroke meetings in Miami in 2001, had looked at over 5,500 MRIs of the brains of Americans. And at age 50, they begin to see these tiny little white spots, which are what? Little strokes. But, age 50, hey, big brain. Tiny stroke, not a problem. Maybe when you're 50. Now you're 65. Suddenly, 15 more years of the good old American diet. And now you find yourself more often than before, sweetheart, where did I leave the car keys? Well, you get through that. Now you're 75, 10 more years of the good old American diet. You look at her and you say, sweetheart, where did I leave the car? She's kind of understanding. You get through that. 10 more years suddenly goes by. You're 85. You look at her and you say, are you my sweetheart? You don't suddenly wake up on your 85th birthday with dementia. You work hard in all those preceding decades to lay the foundation. And here is a normal MRI. Here is one where I counted 90 of these little strokes. Can you imagine a message trying to go through that scar tissue? Now look here. On the left, the brain is all the way out to the skull, like it should be. Here, the brain has got this big gap. Cerebral atrophy. You don't want this as you get older. How can you stop this from happening as you get older? We haven't talked much about it, but now we do. Exercise. If you're going to walk 4 or 5 times a week, fast enough to break a sweat, or you can bike, or you can swim, other exercise which will keep this brain intact. The areas that you enlarge are the hippocampus for memory, the frontal lobe for executive thinking. And here on your left is the thigh muscle of a 40-year-old triathlete. On the right, upper thigh muscle, 74-year-old couch potato. Thigh muscle, 70-year-old triathlete. The message is pretty clear. Yeah, that's the importance of exercise. Now, coming to my office, in the early part of our study, one of the gentlemen had to stop 5 times, crossing the skyway because of pain in his calf. Because he had a partially blocked artery in his thigh. So we got a pulse volume. And here it was at baseline. And I forgot all about his leg. I was so focused on his heart. And 11 months later, he said to me one day, do you recall, Dr. Esselstyn, when I first started seeing you, I was stopping 5 times crossing the skyway to your office? Yeah. He said, you know, the last month, it got to be 4 times, then it was 3, then it was 2, then it was 1. I don't stop anymore. The pain's gone. Don, back you go till they got to the vascular lab. And suddenly, bingo, it was now double what it was before. And that was our message. Within 15 months of starting the study, we had absolutely rock-solid, irrefutable scientific evidence that food and food alone could reverse cardiovascular disease. And you're saying, well, wait a minute. What about the statins? 1986, we didn't have any statins, okay? So I've given you 2 examples tonight of how this disease, for the poor patients who cannot tolerate statins, don't want to take them, can't afford them, if they do this right, they don't need them. Okay, here's another. This is a 78-year-old retired high school chemistry teacher, and he was getting, with his wife, they would enter square dance contests as part of the retirement. And it was during the fast square dance, he was getting bilateral calf pain. And he saw these vascular surgeons who got this image showing how diseased his arteries were. He didn't like the idea of the big operation they planned for him, so he found us and said during counseling, Dr. Esselstyn, if I choose your method, how long will it take to get rid of my calf pain? So I looked at him with great wisdom in my face. And I said, probably about 10 or 11 months. 3 months later, I got a phone call. Dr. Esselstyn, you do not speak the truth. The pain is gone. Now, I never know what it's quite like in Detroit, but in Cleveland, when you're watching a mystery or a sporting event, just before the advertisement comes on, you will hear the mellifluous tones of the announcer say something like, when the moment is right, will you be ready? We all know that the penile artery is really quite tiny compared to the coronary artery to the heart, and not infrequently, before somebody comes down with heart disease, they may find they're no longer able to raise the flag. However, all is not lost. Not infrequently, 10 or 11 months after, if I counsel somebody, I'll get a phone call. Dr. Esselstyn, yes, this is Mr. So-and-so. Sure enough. Yeah, I really thought I ought to give you a call because recently something has come up. And I'm wondering if I don't owe you another check. All right, now I promised you tonight, before we wrapped up, that we would talk about what happens to those patients who have a plaque in the epicardial coronary artery. Epicardial simply means the large part of the heart arteries to the heart, which are riding on the surface of the heart, which kind of allows them to be dealt with stents and with bypass. And that's the epicardial artery. Now, what you're looking at here is what we call a PET scan. And this happens to be a 60-year-old stockbroker downtown in Cleveland with a cholesterol, as you see upper right, 248 when we saw him at this time. And this is a PET rubidium dipyridamole scan, a PET scan. And if it's orange or yellow, that's good, but here it's terrible. Poor flow where it's green. I counseled him at this point, and his cholesterol in 10 days went from 248 to 137. 3 weeks later, we repeated the PET scan. It's back. What's going on here? We didn't wash out a plaque, no matter what kind it is, in 3 weeks. Why is it all coming back? And here, I think, is the answer. That's a heart without any muscle. And you can see the large epicardial coronary arteries, the right coronary artery, anterior descending, and the circumflex. Those are the ones that get all the stents and bypasses and so forth. But look where they all go. They all go into the muscle. Look at the thousands and thousands of vessels in that muscle. So I called several years ago Rodriguez, who is the cardiovascular pathologist at the Cleveland Clinic, who dissects over 200 hearts a year from the deceased. And I said, Rodriguez, how often do you ever see good old-fashioned garden variety plaque once the artery has entered the muscle? Never. Maybe once in a very, very great while with a severe diabetic. So what's going on? When you have so beaten down your endothelial cells, not only are they no longer making your vasodilator, nitric oxide, they're now your enemy. They're making a vasoconstrictive thromboxane and endothelin. So, well, that's why often, literally within 5 to 10 days, people who come to us with chronic angina suddenly see this improvement. Why? Because this entire cascade of intramuscular vessels, although it doesn't have the plaque, it is all constricted. It is all pinched, if you will. And as suddenly as you are kind enough to your endothelial cells, they stop making the vasoconstrictor thromboxane and endothelin, and they start making nitric oxide. So this entire enormous cascade of intramuscular vessels dilates. And if you recall, in physics, Poiseuille's law of flow through the hollow viscus is related to the force power of the radius. Translation, a tiny increase in diameter is a huge increase in flow, which accounts, I think, for why you see that prompt improvement in return. So, why am I so, you're probably saying, these are 8 ways of measuring disease reversal. We've talked about the angiogram. It happens obviously in a stress test. I've shown you the PET scan. I've talked about the carotid ultrasound. We talked about pulse volume on the leg and the symptoms reversing of angina, claudication, and erectile dysfunction. Now, for a moment, I never feel it's fair of me to come to Detroit from Cleveland without letting you know that this was a building where I worked as a surgeon on the 8th floor for many years. But I bring this to you because I think it's important. You know what the trees look like in Cleveland in February. But now I find myself actually in 57 years out of medical school, I find myself more passionate than ever before about the field of medicine. Why? Because, as I said at the outset, we are truly on the cusp of what could be a seismic revolution in health. And this seismic revolution in health will never come about through another pill, another drug, another procedure, or an operation. The seismic revolution in health is going to come about when we have the will and the grit and the determination to share with patients what is the lifestyle, and most specifically, the nutritional literacy that will allow them to completely eliminate chronic illness, whether it's heart disease, whether it's strokes, vascular dementia, whether it's hypertension, diabetes, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, allergies, and asthma. It's the most incredible list that we've ever had, and it goes on and on. Because if we can get the public to really comprehend this nutritional literacy, we will annihilate chronic illness. Thank you. Hello, there we go. But thank you for putting up with me. That's the opening act. Because where the rubber meets the road in this is where patients are able to understand how to make these food changes. And I've been so lucky to have at my side throughout this whole fascination and interest my wife, Ann, who I never could have done it without Ann. And she used to be a very spirited school teacher now that she's retired from teaching. And she's really full-time helping me. I recall that several years ago when she was out at John McDougall's and she gave a presentation, when she finished, a man in the front row got up and said, "My God, that's one of the better ones I've ever heard. You're like Julia Childs on steroids."
I hope is this microphone working? Is it on? I've got a good voice, so I really don't even need a microphone. But my husband wrote Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease specifically for people with heart disease in mind. And no meat, no oil, no dairy. And in his book, he has no nuts, a few seeds, no avocado. I mean, it's just it's an amazing program for anybody that has heart disease, if you have diabetes, if you want to lose weight. Amazing. And a few years later, our son Rip wrote the Engine 2 Diet. Rip had been a professional triathlete and then a firefighter. And when he wrote this book, he wanted to distinguish between the two. So he called his plant Strong and dubbed my husband's plant Perfect. And so I'm really talking about plant, but Plant Strong. Rip has nuts, avocado. It's just a little looser, a little higher fat in his program, which is fine. I mean, if you don't have heart disease, some nuts, some avocado, go for it. But it's miraculous when people follow it exactly. And then Rip later wrote another book called Plant Strong. And then our daughter Jane and I wrote the Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease Cookbook, which really follows my husband's program very carefully. And then Rip and Jane wrote the 7-Day Rescue Diet. And I'm calling this to your attention because of any book that I can think of that is closer to what my husband's Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. This is the book. It is really wonderful, and it is magic if you follow it. Just one more. And then Jane and our daughter Jane and Rip wrote the Engine 2 Cookbook just last December. So that is a pile of books. But the thing that I want to talk to you about is that in order to be successful, you got to make it simple. It just has to be simple. I mean, if you love being complicated in a fancy cook, yeah, wonderful. But for most of us, you're working all day, you get home and it's 7, and you don't have anything to eat. You need to find ways to make food work. And so our sort of go-to meal always has been rice and beans. Brown rice, I mean, you can take a can of beans and literally heat them up under hot water. To put some frozen corn that you also thaw under hot water. And chop some tomatoes and get some salsa. I mean, you've got a good meal. You could bake a sweet potato in the microwave, although I think it's much more delicious when you bake them in the oven. And then you could take some black beans that you, again, heat under hot water and put that on top. Put some chopped red peppers, some green onions, and then some mango, little chunks of mango, and sprinkle that with lime. It's delicious, it's easy, it's quick. And something that I don't usually do, but I thought I would do here because you all are so far ahead of most of the world. But I just in talking at dinner, it is hard when you have to have things just ready at the last minute. So I want to give you a few of the things that I've found that I really love to have on hand. And because I know you have Whole Foods stores here, and because when our son Rip left the firehouse, he was hired by John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, to kind of be their roving ambassador with good health. But he also asked him to create some foods that had no meat, no oil, and no dairy. And one of the things when people start changing how they eat is you go in front of the pasta sauces and you spend half an hour trying to find something that has no oil, and there is nothing. But you know that if you find something that's engine 2, that it'll have no oil. So some of the products that Rip has created, I keep on hand in our kitchen, and I just want to tell you about them. And my current favorite thing that I eat every night are the engine 2 Have you lost me? And they come in the roasted vegetable, nut squash and kale, and garbanzo spinach, and there's another one which I don't have here. But what I love, boil the water. In 4 minutes, it's ready. But this is what you do. You cut up a whole bunch of kale or a whole bunch of any greens and cut them up and put them in for the 4 minutes that you're cooking this. When you drain it, you have a whole meal. And by the way, before I even talk about the Engine 2 burgers, I want to comment that there is something out there that is probably the worst thing you could possibly have for your health. And that is the Beyond Beef burgers. If you have looked at the ingredients in them, there are 3 different kinds of oil. You might as well eat 10 beef burgers instead. They are beyond health. So here are these Engine 2 burgers. They are, I happen to have the Italian fennel and the Tuscan kale white bean, but you can cook them. It's so crazy. Put them in the... And they get crispy on the outside, and they're nice and soft on the inside. And that's a really quick meal, or even a quick snack. Then, another thing I love to have on hand are these 2 little things. This is the organic firehouse chili and the organic Moroccan-style stew. So take a big bowl, fill it with spinach, pour in the chili, put it in the microwave. You got something delicious. You can add sriracha hot sauce, whatever you like. But another cool thing to do with either one of these is the Engine 2 pizza. This is great, but guess what you can do? Take the firehouse chili, mix it up with all that spinach, spread that on here, put anything else on top, cook it, quick. It's a great, fast meal. And then the other thing that I love to have on hand, and I don't think I have them, but they're called the Squarito Burritos. And they come in 3 or 4 different flavors. And they are just about this big. You take a pair of scissors, cut the end, put them in the microwave, and in 2 or 3 minutes, they're ready. But this is what I like to do. If they're thawed or whatever, put them in a panini machine so that what's that bready part, gets nice and crispy and it's delicious. Then you could cut them in half, put chopped tomato, greens, maybe a little salsa. Anyway, those are some of the things that I love to have on hand just at the last minute. And not that we have them every night, but, it could be every night if we're desperate. So, I want to talk about oil because I've talked to a number of people tonight who were sort of partially doing this, but they haven't got rid of the oil. It's the easiest thing to do. Get rid of the oil in your house. You have no oil, you can't use it. So any liquid works. Any liquid will work. You can use water, wine, beer, vinegars. It doesn't matter. And one of the things of the liquid that is nice is to use a vegetable broth. And there are a lot of different vegetable broths, but this is the key thing that I hope you will take home tonight. You know what? I think this is doing a problem. That's it. All right. So, vegetable stock. You got to read ingredients. This happens to be Kitchen Basics vegetable stock. And I was really kind of horrified when not horrified, I was kind of excited when I saw that Kitchen Basics came out with another organic vegetable stock. And I really love this one. There's no sodium in it. It's great. When I read the ingredients, this is what you have to do. In this organic Kitchen Basics vegetable stock, there are 3 different kinds of sugar they add. So it is such an important thing to read ingredients. So when you are cooking your, when you're using your, whatever you need a little liquid in what you're cooking, look at the ingredients of what you're putting in. And by the way, Engine 2 makes a vegetable stock. I've never been such an advertiser for Engine 2, but so the hardest thing, perhaps, is finding a salad dressing that you love that has no oil. And the thing that changed our life was when we discovered hummus that was made without tahini. Years ago, a company in Cleveland called Sahara Cuisine made a hummus without any oil and without any tahini also, which is that brown sesame seeds. And that became our mayonnaise. It is just the basis of so many things. Guess what? Engine 2 makes a whole lot of hummuses without oil and without tahini. But the next thing that happened for us was we discovered the absolute amazing deliciousness of balsamic vinegars that weren't just the $2 one that you get at the grocery store. And the Olive Tap was the place where I don't know if there's there must be some stores here where you can go in and taste different vinegars. Because it makes such a difference in salad dressing. So many of my husband's patients just like to put the balsamic vinegars on top. I mean, you can have black currant, you can have chocolate, I mean, you can have lemon, you can have cilantro lime. It's crazy, the whole variety of different kinds of balsamic vinegars. So our favorite salad dressing is one where I use hummus, balsamic vinegar, a little mustard. I will take an orange, cut out the sections, squeeze the juice, maybe put a little mustard in, and I love fresh ginger. So, but fool around, find something that you like, and then use it all the time. So, the other thing about no oil is I am not a proponent of baking, but everybody needs to have some kind of possible cake that you can have if you've got a birthday or if you have some special occasion or you want to have some kind of special whatever. I could not believe it when our daughter Jane called me before we wrote this book and said she had come up with a kale cake with blueberry frosting. It's really good. I promise you, it's delicious. So if you are baking, you can use apple butter, applesauce, baby food prunes, a really ripe banana instead of oil. And but speaking of baby food prunes, this is Gerber baby food prunes, just the regular, and on the shelf next to it is the Gerber organic baby food prunes. And in the organic baby food prunes, they add tuna oil. So read ingredients, don't get complacent. So, you're gonna, no oil, you can do it. It's easy, and you will just never, ever want to use it again once you've gotten rid of it. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about is using greens. I want you to fill your life with greens. You heard that list from my husband. But also, you need to get all the colors in there, too. But people tend to sort of, I don't know, just not eaten a lot of greens in their life. So this happens to be the curly kale that's still wet from my garden. It is still wet from my garden this morning. But this is the problem with kale, and that is there is a thick stem. So if you cut this up, if you buy kale cut up in a bag, you get hunks of stem, and it doesn't cook the same time. So you need to be a good stripper. And if you learn to be a good stripper, your life is just transformed. And especially if you get children and grandchildren and spouses to be good strippers. So you hold the kale in one hand and you take the other and you pull. So you have this little handful of spinach with heft, and there's nothing wrong. Cut this up, put it in your soups, but or dogs love those stems. Now that happens to be the curly kale. This is another kind of kale. This is the red Russian kale, also wet from my garden. Great, stripping it. This is another kind of kale that I like a lot, that is the lacinato or dinosaur kale. And this kale is really, really satisfying to strip. And then, so what are you going to do with all this kale? If you're cooking, as I said, with the lasagna, no, what was that, ravioli. If you're cooking pasta, fill that pot with all these greens as that pasta is cooking. If you're the first layer of pizza, for instance, mix pasta sauce and greens. You can cook the kale ahead and then mix it together and spread that on first. My favorite thing is a kale sandwich, where I just, load that sandwich with kale and lemon, and ooh, it's so good. So you can just, or else plop the kale on the side of your plate, or the greens, or whatever. Now there is another green that is great, and that is collards. And what I like about collards, and actually they strip really great too. What I like a lot about collards is that you can use the collards like a wrap. So instead, it becomes your bread, particularly if you're trying to lose weight. And you really don't know the difference. So you take this, and you put it in boiling water for 10 seconds so it gets flexible. Right now, you see it's going to crack. And I want to make a collard burrito. So I'm going to fill it with rice and beans and vegetables and salsa. And then I'm going to make it into a little collard burrito, like that. And then I will put pasta sauce and maybe 6 of these and pasta sauce and top it with nutritional yeast and bake it, and it's great. So that is one thing. You can also make collard sushi. And when you do that, you take the collard, again, put it 10 seconds in boiling water so it gets flexible, put lots of hummus, maybe red pepper strips, cucumber strips, mango strips, asparagus that's lightly cooked, carrots shreds, and lots and lots and lots of lemon. And then you fold it up into a sausage shape and cut it into little collard sushis. And that's a really fun thing, and kids can make theirs and put whatever they like in them. Now, Beets and beet greens are great. I love to peel beets, and the best way to peel them when you boil them, and it's kind of like peeling a really fat snake. That skin just comes right off. And we have some nice recipes for this in our book. And that, of course, is just, both the beets and the beet greens are great for your endothelium. Now, you've just got brown, darn it, all you've got in the house is the organic Firehouse chili. Shoot, you don't have any greens. But you remember, you always have those 3 hearts of romaine, because you know, and I know, that they never die. So you pull out one of these, and because you are so strong, because you are plant-based, you twist this end off, and now you have this little handful of romaine scoops that you can use with anything. Sometimes when we're driving, we just we take along a thing of hummus and we just dip and drive. So make all these green. Oh, this is Swiss chard from my garden. This is not as wet as the others, but it is great. And I love Swiss chard because the stem is soft. So just cut this up, fill whatever you're eating with it, and you've got just the best possible treat. Now, my third thing that I want to emphasize is you're going to have no oil, you're going to eat lots of greens and all the other vegetables, and you are going to find some way to eat oats for breakfast, because oats have got a property that you're not going to find another time of the day to eat oats if you don't eat them at breakfast. Toast, that's not going to do anything for you. You want to eat the food that's going to be powerful. Oats help decrease inflammation. Oats decrease your cholesterol. They are dose responsive. The more you eat, the more powerful. And they help keep your blood sugar level. So I want to show you what my husband eats for breakfast. And I forgot to get a bowl, but this will work. And he takes Quaker oats, just these little guys in here, and he puts them in his bowl. You saw me do that? And then he will put some chia or flaxseed meal for omega-3. And then he will put a banana, raspberries, blueberries, strawberries, blackberries, whatever berries I will have, frozen or fresh. And then he will put on an alternative milk. And there are all kinds of different milks. I can't tell you what to get. I would recommend, if you're starting out, that you try the almond unsweetened milk. My husband happens to love the oat milk, and if you have young kids, it's quite sweet, just naturally, so they like it a lot. But there are so many different milks out there. But read the ingredients. Cashew milk adds oil. All the rice milks add oil. So you've got to read ingredients. So that's what he eats for breakfast. And it used to last him, he would leave at 6, drive into the clinic with that bowl of cereal between his legs, and it would last him until 3, or when he had, after surgery. So I want to tell you what my current favorite breakfast is, because if you love oatmeal, go for it. I mean, really. But I find oatmeal just a little mushy. I love steel-cut oats because they still keep their crunch. So this is my breakfast, and I just hope you'll all go home tomorrow and have this. 1/2 cup of steel-cut oats. 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, which gives it a nice smoothness. 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric, which is wonderful against inflammation. And 1 teaspoon of sriracha. It's just not hot, it just does something. These are the 2 things. 1/2 cup of shiitake mushrooms. And 2 cups of kale or anything that's been stripped and cut into bite-sized pieces, and then 2 cups of water. And I cook it for about 8 to 10 minutes. And I can't tell you how delicious it is. So I hope that you'll all learn to have such an exciting breakfast. And you know, the thing about breakfast is that don't fool around. Find a breakfast you love and then eat it. I mean, I heard people at our table who they have breakfast they love. Yes, you know, do that, even though I want you to try mine. But that is key, so that breakfast is something that's going to get you going, but also something that's going to be powerful for you. Now, I need to stop, but I would like to give you a couple of thoughts. If you all don't know about the Yonana machine, which makes you put in a frozen frozen banana, and out comes banana soft serve. And you could use frozen mangoes. You can add other frozen berries. It's a wonderful dessert. And there is one other thing, and I can't find it in this messy table here, but there is something that most people don't know. How many of you have ever had manna bread? Ha! I can't believe that I found something that all of you. Paul, do you know manna bread?
Yes, I do.
Oh, shoot. Anyway, manna bread has got 4 ingredients. It's got organic wheat, carrots, raisins. I don't have the package here. Water. And it's this sort of, it's a little bit moist bread, and you cut it and you toast it. And it is the most amazing. Oh, it's got, did I say raisins? Yeah. So it is delicious. So if you ever have a chance, it is in the frozen part of health food type stores, or you can get it on Amazon.
How do you spell it?
M-A-N-N-A, manna bread. But get the carrot raisin one. That's the one I recommend. And may I just leave you all with one other final thought, and that is that when all of the trans fats went out, coconut saw its place to jump in. And they are in, there is almost nothing that you can buy today that doesn't have some kind of coconut oil, coconut milk, coconut this, coconut that. Coconut is 90% saturated fat. This little can of coconut milk, if you take 1/4 cup of coconut milk, it has got 12 grams of fat, and of those 12, 10 are saturated. So you love coconut. Don't despair. Get coconut extract and 1 teaspoon and a cup of alternative milk of whatever kind, and you've got coconut milk that is much more healthy than anything else. So with this amazing group, you're going to take over the world in this, and it's just great.